Good morning, North America. Welcome to Church Talk TV. Lively talk about life, church, and church life. I'm your co-host, Dr. Bill Tenney-Britton, and I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Dr. Kris Tenney-Britton, and we're broadcasting from our studio in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of America. Say good morning, Kris.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Church Talk TV.
Kris and Bill Tenney-Britton here today to talk about connecting, keeping people after you got them there. So here's what I'm talking about. You've invited someone or you invited someone's, they're coming to your online worship service, or they're coming to your in-person worship service, or they're coming into your drive-in worship service, however you define worship service.
Process one.
Process one. You got to get them there. But once you got them there, if they don't come back over and over and over, you've kind of lost out. And we know that the numbers aren't really great about getting them to come back because, once upon a time, people came every week. But,
so you have to put process 2 into place, and that is the connect process. Exactly. Now, part of the piece about getting people back and calling them regulars, it used to be regular church attendance was probably 3 times a month, right? So somebody might miss
or
once
you never
a month.
Missed, or you never missed.
Or you never missed, right? And then it went to twice a month, and now it's down to once a month. And we know that in certain places, it's particularly geographically, that you're down to once every 6 weeks.
I would be interested to see what that numbers are like now with COVID and the online worship services. No studies have been done that I know of yet, but yet. It'll be very interesting to see what those look like. But remember,
end of the year reports.
Yeah, the end of the year reports. But let's be honest. There will be people saying, "Wow, we had 7,000 people," because 7,000 people have watched as it scrolled down. They counted every scroll anyway.
Well, so they came, right? But you invited very well, but how are you connecting?
That's right. But remember, if someone is regular and only coming maybe once a month, if they aren't used to coming to church, they're coming now. They used to come never to church, and now they're coming 12 times a year. I mean, that's a lot, isn't it? I mean,
that's even better than twice a
year. That's right, even better than twice
Christmas,
a year.
Yeah.
That's right, exactly right. So you got to just bear in mind that regular attendance comes as time goes by. It's not quite the same, but nonetheless, you got to get them coming back, and that's the whole point of this video.
Connecting them, right. So we do have to connect them, and so we have to connect in the worship service and through the worship service, if that's where they're coming. I mean, still, I would think that it's not that I think. Well, I do think, but first, people still tend to come primarily through worship, whether that's in building or in sanctuary, wherever, in worship center or online. And then while they're there, they have to connect to a person that will help connect them to groups that through that helps to connect them to the congregation and then to God. It used to be, I would think at least, that I wanted people to connect with God. And so I would design these worship services for the ultimate in God connection, so they could touch God and be touched by God. But the reality is that happens to very few people these days. So it happens to some. But what we need to do, or recognize at least, is that they will connect to a person, to a group, to then the church, call it my church, even though they may not be a member, and that through all of that, you're going to see a connection to God. They're going to experience a connection to God. So
let's do some nuts and bolts. Let's talk about what that looks like to get people connected. They've invited you, you invite them, they've come, they've shown up this week, and let's say this is their first week. The question is, how do you get them connected so that they'll come back next week? Because that's the point. Get them back next week.
So since we're talking about worship as being that first, not yet connection, but that first touch, if you will, we want to make sure that we have hosts and worship buddies in place. If you've spent any time with us, Tenney-Brittons at all, you know the importance of having a host. It's somebody, once they get past the greeters, get past the usher, you want to have hosts, people that are are assigned to certain sections of your sanctuary that are there to say, hi, how are you? To introduce them to other people that are watching, in particular for people who are sitting alone. Doesn't matter whether they recognize, or doesn't matter if they recognize whether or not they're new. It just is that they're alone in some way. But everybody is greeted. Those are your hosts. And then you've got your worship buddies. And you can do this online. And we want to be really clear. It's not just for in sanctuary, in worship center, worship that we're talking about. You have a designated host. If you're on Zoom or on Facebook, this is the person who's saying, hi, glad you're here. If you're on Zoom, you're able to do the private chat. Hi, glad that you're here, that you're not just doing that all encompassing greeting, although you're doing that as well. So you've got your hosts, and then your worship buddies are those people who, again, in worship center, in sanctuary, where you have people that are out looking for who is sitting alone. Who can I go sit with? Because no one should ever be by themselves unless they've given indication that that's what they want to do.
The hosts and worship buddies are great, but to make connection, you got to have conversation, and worship buddy can do that, and host can do a little bit of that, although host ought to be passing them off.
Right.
There's something that a lot of churches do, which we do not recommend, okay? So if you are not doing this, please don't start. And if you are doing it, please consider not doing it. And that's the meet and greet. That's where everyone stands up, and sometimes we call it passing the peace.
I was going to say, it's the passing of the peace.
Yeah, which if you're actually passing peace, that'd be one thing, saying peace be with you.
Now I love this. I've watched this in sanctuaries and worship services. You give the peace sign since you can't shake hands or anything.
There's a theological reasoning behind it, but the reality is almost no church that I've ever been in or that I've ever worked with actually does a theological piece.
Yeah.
All they're doing is it's a meet and greet time in the guise of passing the peace. So, whatever you want to call it, the point is that that's the number two thing that visitors hate. They absolutely despise it, because what happens? Y'all stand up and y'all go talk to your friends, and they're going there, what do I do now? And they're totally, so the golden rule is, if you have this, if you're doing the meet and greet, then the number one rule is never let anyone stand alone ever for any time at all. They always need to be talking to somebody. So if you know that there's a guest there, or whether you know they're a guest or not, but you see someone staying alone, your number one job is to get into their face, and not literally in their face, but in their presence, and have a conversation. And you keep that conversation going until someone relieves you, until someone comes up and they are introducing themselves, and then you can leave and stay there until the next person, whatever. Never let anyone stay alone.
But that's why you need a designated person to do that. That person is designated to do that day. That's what they do. So they're not going to go wander into another section or be caught off guard by somebody else who's come to talk to them. Then you just then you connect them to talk.
All right. So you in meet and greet, what do you say? And there's a lot of people, well, how do I keep the conversation going? Well, I want to teach you real quick, what I call the conversation waltz. It's 3 questions, and it's true, they're not actually questions. The first one is, you walk up, you say, hi, I'm, in my case, Bill. I don't think we've met, or I don't think we've had a conversation, or whatever, something I don't think we've had been able to spend time together. So however you want to put it, if you've never seen them before, then hi, I don't think we've met. So that's the first one, and then you get their name. Then the second thing, the question is, you don't ask if they're a visitor. You a visitor? Oh, that's the most rude question you could possibly ask. It puts them on guard. Say, hey, how long have you been coming here? Presume they've been there before. They'll tell you if it's their first time there, but they may have been in the other service, or they may have been there when you were regular and not there on one of your Sundays. So, how long have you been coming? How long have you been coming here? And you'll get an answer, and you can, of course, share your little bit. And then the last question is not what do you do for a living?
Right.
Because we have people today, especially in our economic sort of fluctuations, that aren't employed, and that having to say, oh, I'm looking for a job, is not all that pleasant to have to say. So you say, hey, what keeps you busy during the week? And those 3 things will keep the conversation going for a good bit of time. You don't even probably need other questions. In fact, if you get that far in the meet and greet, your meet and greet's going on far too long.
I would say.
All right. So anyway, that being said, that's the meet and greet if you're having it. But there's other ways to get them to come back.
Okay, but I wanted to say this. When you say, a lot of times when we tell people, we tell them, say your name, I'm Bill, I'm Kris, I don't think we've. A lot of people are really uncomfortable with that because they think they should know everyone. So there are ways to get around that, if you will. I'm not sure that we've met, but I don't always remember. And there are different ways to approach that it's on you. It's not like they're not memorable or something. All right, so another way to connect, to get them to come back, really for getting them to come back, is called the lunch date plan. If you'd like more information about that, more details, you can go back to the January 2016 net results. And there you'll find the article by Paul Borden. But remember, January 2016 net results. I think we've got the address down here, the lunch date plan. And this is where the pastor says to someone who's a first-time guest, hey, I would really like to, I'm glad you're here. I'd really like to take you out to lunch today, get to know you, see if you might have any questions, but I can't today. Could we go next week? And that person may say, I don't know. Well, if they say, I don't know, say, could I follow up with you on Tuesday? And then call them on Tuesday, or better yet, call them on Monday. Let me follow up with you.
But you'll get their contact information that way.
I love that. How do you get people's contact information? Invite them to lunch.
That's right.
Then the next day or the next week, person is going out to lunch with pastor. You've got somebody else who comes in, preferably somebody who spoke to them the first week and says, I saw that you were making arrangements, or pastor asked you out to lunch. It sounds like such a great deal. Could I take you out to lunch next week? I can't today, but could we go next week? So now you've got them back for a third week.
So if you can do that 2 or 3 times without getting predatory, do it a couple times, then they're used to coming back because you've got them coming back for 3 or 4 weeks. Hopefully they're connecting with the worship service and more people around there. But the other thing is you've built relationships. They have a relationship with 3 or 4 people. That is absolutely fabulous. Well, I want to move in because the reality is that a lot of this can't happen right now because of the whole COVID thing. And so I want to talk about, what about your online campus? How do you get people to come back to your online campus? I want to start off by saying, going back to your hosts, you got to have someone who's publicly greeting. So if you're on Facebook or whatever, you see someone come in, and on Facebook it's nice because it has their name, and you can say, hey, Bob, good to see you here. Thanks for joining us. And they may or may not respond, but the public, welcome church, how's it going? And firing some questions or whatever, trying to get some engagement is one way. But the other thing is to send a private message, a direct message, a DM or a PM to whoever it is. Say, hey, good to see you. I'm Bill, and I just, if you have any questions, or I want to let you know that this is coming up. In our case, the church that we attend, they have a communion every week. And we're disciples, and so that's normal. And even though we're online, we're taking communion. So you can say, hey, make sure you go grab some bread or a cracker and some juice if you want to take communion with us. We'll be doing that later. And begin to engage an online conversation. You want to invite conversation. Try to build something up if you can. Another thing that we've seen churches do, and we really love this, is that they have if you have any questions, you announce this maybe in the sermon, but also through your chat room or chat client, and say, hey, listen, if you have questions, you can send questions to questions@yourchurch.com or whatever, and so that people can say, oh, well, there's a place for me to engage.
So with this, so you get the opportunities to engage. You need to have an invitation to the next event. Again, whether that's in person, in building, or out or up online campus. So we call this the handoff. I'm always talking about handoffs. It's like, so what? Now what's next? To what are you inviting? You've always got to have something to invite people to. And sometimes it's something along the lines of a sermon series can be part of that. But with the sermon series, you still need an event or opportunities, game nights. We talked about that last week. Movie nights, kids programming. Be thinking, what are you going to invite? And never go into anything. Never go into a worship service. Never go into any kind of an event without knowing what the handoff is and being prepared to express it and make that invitation.
Well, another thing that you may want to have, and if you have a worship team, this is more helpful. But pastors, this is something you might want to do is have a resource area. So if your sermon's on divorce or your sermon's on discipleship, have resources there that are available maybe online. Well, we want them online, but with links and whatnot, so that they can be handed out, but also so you can point your visitors to them directly. So, hey, Bob, good to see you. I just want to let you know that you can download the handout for the sermon such and such place, or you can get more information about this passage over here. The other thing is a lot of churches are doing virtual coffee times or lobby times, either after service or if they have multiple services, do in between. Those are normally a Zoom kind of thing or a community conference kind of software apps where people come together and they can just chit chat. Everyone's unmuted because most of us are muted during the worship service, but we unmute and you have conversation. You just begin to let your hair down and have fun, have a conversation with people during this time. I've been in some of those, and sometimes, and I'll be honest with you, I know the pastor has seeded a couple questions, about the sermon, and someone says, "Pastor, you said such and such, and could you clarify?" Or "I didn't understand this," or whatever, and that helps get the conversation focus on spiritual things, but also brings the sermon home. But regardless of what it is, make sure that if you have that kind of coffee time, again, a designated host to greet those new folks. I was in a room, actually happened this way. Someone came into their coffee time. No one knew them, and you could see the chat room going on. It was chat to everyone, so the guest could see it. It says, "Who is that? I don't know who that is." And it was like, really? Ask the person. "Hi, welcome to Sing You Galaxy 47. I'm Bill. You are." And it was horrible. It was, guess what? They stayed for about 2 minutes and they bailed off. I don't blame them. So virtual coffee time is a great time to go. So
okay, but don't forget about tea parties.
There you are. Yeah.
I'm totally into tea parties, and just a little bit ago he reminded me, you need to have another tea party because I haven't had one. I've been doing that with a couple of friends for a while, but we haven't done it since November. I'm afraid, sorry you ladies. But I've talked about doing virtual tea parties, and in fact, I've also talked about doing a virtual tea party that could be cross country or even international. I have some friends in other countries that could do this with, and even sending little tea sets, little dessert sets. Can you imagine doing something like that so that we're all having tea at the same time? But it's something to invite to. Don't forget too that if you've got a small group, I just went to a conference the other evening, online conference. They're getting ready to start a small group, and it was in the invitation, it was in the follow-up, and I just got an email this morning saying, "Hey, would you like to come to this small group?" And they don't even know who I am, but they followed up. Don't miss the opportunity.
So much of what we just talked about, of course, it includes invitations. And so I want to remind you, go back and look at the invitation videos. We have 2 invitation videos that we've just recently done for Church Talk. Yeah. We want to point you to them. Hey, we are out of time, but I want to point out that we have a resource for you that might be helpful. Last month, or this issue's of Net Results, the holiday planning issue. I know everyone's thinking holidays. The holidays were like in December, and now this is for all those other holidays. It's Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day and Easter and Lent and Memorial Day and all that. But it's a planning event, a planning issue that covers how to plan for events. My favorite article in this particular issue was written by Andy Romstead. He's a Lutheran pastor of a large church, and he talks about breathing life into stale church events. Hey, we're out of time. Say goodbye. We'll see you next week.
Have a great week.